I worked at a boutique hotel in Amsterdam for 6 years. One July afternoon, an American couple checked in and immediately asked where to park their rental car. I explained that central Amsterdam doesn't really do parking you. Use paid garages blocks away or take trams. The husband laughed. We drove here. There's gotta be street parking. I told him the nearest spot was probably in a garage 15 minutes away on foot. He looked at his wife, then back at me. In America, hotels have parking. It's included, I nodded. This is Amsterdam. We have canals instead of parking lots. Insisted on driving around anyway. 2 hours later, he returned on foot, furious, saying he'd parked in a loading zone and gotten a €100 ticket in 10 minutes. He demanded I reimburse him since I didn't warn him properly. I pointed to the paragraph about parking in his confirmation email. He said he doesn't read emails, he just books. He tried to dispute the ticket by calling it entrapment. The city kept his money, and this is the level of detail I break down in every video patterns most travelers never even notice. If catching these dynamics is your thing, make sure you're here for the next one. Quick one. A guest asked if our Dutch breakfast could be made American style. I said we serve what we serve. She asked if we had pancake mix she could use. We did not. She left a review saying we were anti-American. A man asked why our outlets were weird European ones. I offered an adapter. He said he shouldn't need one because electricity is universal. He tried to jam his plug-in. Anyway, Sparked blamed our faulty wiring. Stories never stop coming. I sold train tickets at Munich Hauptbahnhof. An American man approached and asked for a ticket to Berlin, first class, but I'm not paying extra. I explained first class costs more. He said, in America, you get upgraded for free if you're polite. I'm being polite. I told him that's not how Deutsche Bahn works. He pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot of an American Airlines loyalty program. See, complimentary upgrades. It's standard. I said trains aren't airlines and Germany isn't America. He demanded to speak to someone who understands customer service. My supervisor came over, repeated what I'd said in simpler terms. The American insisted that international travel law required equal treatment of ticket classes. When asked where he'd learned this, he said, common sense. He bought a second-class ticket, then sat in first class anyway. The conductor fined him €50. He asked for a lawyer. On a train, the conductor pointed to the legal text on the ticket. The man photographed it and said he'd have his attorney translate it. Most people hear stories like this and stop at the laugh, but if you appreciate the deeper cultural patterns underneath these moments, this is the channel that actually unpacks them. Subscribe so these breakdowns don't get buried in your feed. He got off in Berlin, still muttering about discrimination. I waited tables in the Marais for 3 years. An American family of 4 sat down, ordered elaborately, asked 1,000 questions. Fine, normal at the end. The father handed me cash and said, the tip's in there, don't spend it all in one place. I counted it. Exact change for the bill? 0 tip? I politely mentioned that in France, service is included, but if he'd enjoyed the meal, a small tip is appreciated though not required. He looked offended. I just told you the tip is in there. The extra €5, I recounted. There was no extra €5. He got defensive. Maybe it fell out. Anyway, you get salary, right? Tips are for Americans who work for tips, I explained. I do get salary, that's why service is included in his bill. He said, so you're double dipping. In America, that's fraud. His wife tried to shush him. He continued, you should be thanking me for even coming here and supporting your economy. He then asked for the manager to complain about my aggressive tipping demands. My manager, a 60-year-old Frenchman who speaks 4 words of English, came over, listened, and said in French, tell him to leave. I did. The American said we'd be reported to the American consulate for wage theft. We never heard from any consulate. I'm a pharmacist in Stockholm. An American woman came in frantically asking for Benadryl. I asked what symptoms she had. She said none, she just wanted to stock up because it's cheaper in Europe. I explained we don't sell Benadryl over the counter. She'd need to describe her symptoms for an equivalent. She got annoyed. I don't have symptoms. I just want Benadryl. Pink box. You must have it. I told her Swedish pharmacies work differently. We recommend based on need, not brand requests. She said, that's socialist medicine. I want what I want. I offered to suggest an antihistamine if she explained what she needed it for. She refused, saying it was none of my business. Then she asked if she could buy antibiotics just in case. Said absolutely not without a prescription. She claimed her doctor in Florida told her to stock up while traveling. I said that's not legal here. She called me a liar, said she'd bought antibiotics in Mexico without prescriptions, so Europe should be the same. I explained Sweden has strict medication laws. She demanded to see the manager. I was the manager. She left, shouting that Swedish healthcare was a human rights violation. I worked the front desk at a Vienna hotel. An American man checked in and immediately asked what time the German tour started. I told him we offered Vienna city tours, not German tours, since we're in Austria. He laughed. Vienna's in Germany? I saw it on the itinerary. I pulled up a map on the computer, showed him Austria, explained Vienna as the capital. He squinted at the screen. That's not what my travel agent said. I asked what his agent said. He claimed she'd told him Vienna was near Munich. So basically Germany. Said Munich is in Germany. Vienna is in Austria. Different countries. He shook his head. I don't think so. Everyone here speaks German, right? I confirmed that, yes, we speak German. He said, exactly. So it's Germany. I explained that Austria and Germany are separate nations that happen to share a language, like the US and England share English. He said that was completely different because America earned English by winning the Revolutionary War. I gave up. Handed him a tourist map with Austria clearly labeled, and said, enjoy Germany. He didn't catch the sarcasm. 2 days later, he complained that none of the tours mentioned Berlin. I told him Berlin is 500 kilometers away. He said, then why did I come here? I work at a chocolate shop in Brussels. An American couple came in, looked around, and the wife asked, do you speak French or Belgian? I said we speak French, Dutch, and English. She looked confused. But you're in Belgium? What's the Belgian language? I explained Belgium has 3 official languages, French, Dutch, and German, but no language called Belgian. She turned to her husband. That doesn't make sense. Every country has its own language, he agreed. Yeah, like in America, we speak American. I corrected gently. You speak English, he said. No, we speak American. English is what they speak in England. It's different, I didn't argue. The wife asked which language was more Belgian, French or Dutch. I said neither. They're both official. She asked which one real Belgians prefer. I said it depends on the region. She said, that sounds made up. Her husband bought chocolate and asked if I could write thank you in Belgian on the card. I wrote it in French. He looked disappointed. I wanted the Belgian one. Told him there isn't one. He left a review saying our staff refused to accommodate American customers by using the local language. I run a small cafe in Zurich. An American tourist ordered coffee, then tried to pay with euros. I told him we use Swiss francs. He said, Switzerland's in Europe. You have to take euros. I explained Switzerland isn't in the European Union and uses its own currency. He insisted that was impossible, because all of Europe uses euros. I offered to point him to a currency exchange across the street. He refused, saying he shouldn't have to exchange money within the same continent. Pulled out his phone and Googled it right there. When he saw Switzerland indeed uses francs, he said, this is a scam. You're making tourists exchange money to charge extra fees. I told him I don't run the country's monetary policy. He asked why Switzerland wasn't in the EU if it's surrounded by EU countries. I said that's a question for Swiss voters. He said in America we'd never let our neighbors bully us into a different currency. I noted that America's neighbors do use different currencies. Mexico has pesos. Canada has dollars. He said, but those are dollars. It's basically the same. I gave up and accepted his euros at a bad exchange rate just to make him leave. He got his coffee, took one sip, and asked why it was so small.
Art, I told him that's a normal espresso.
He said American coffee is bigger. I suggested he order an Americano next time. He said, "Why would I order that? I'm already American." The best one happened last month. I'm a tour guide in Prague. An American couple booked a communist history tour. We visited sites from the Soviet era, discussed the Velvet Revolution, showed them Cold War monuments. The husband kept interrupting to say things like, "This is so different from what Reagan said." At one memorial, he asked why Czechs didn't just fight back like Americans would have. Explained, authoritarian regimes don't work that way. He said Americans would have handled it better because of freedom in our DNA. His wife agreed. At the end, we stood outside the old secret police headquarters. I explained how citizens were monitored, arrested, and interrogated. The husband got quiet, then said, "You know, this is a lot like cancel culture in America now." I asked him to clarify. He said being criticized on Twitter for his opinions was exactly like living under Soviet surveillance. His wife nodded. "We're basically in a dictatorship now too." Didn't know what to say. I've heard relative stories about actual persecution under communism. I told him politely that social media backlash and state-sponsored terror aren't comparable. He disagreed, said I wouldn't understand because Europe is already socialist. Then he tipped me in dollars, saying, "Spend it wisely. This is real money." The bills were damp and crumpled. I exchanged them later for 200 koruna. Bought a beer? Some tourists come to learn. Others come to teach us about our own countries. The second group never runs out of confidence. Even when they're standing in the wrong country, speaking the wrong facts, holding the wrong currency. They'll argue with a Parisian about French tipping, a German about train laws, a Czech about Soviet history. And they'll leave reviews saying we were the rude ones, got more stories where these came from. Next time, Americans versus the metric system. Spoiler, the metric system wins.